Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Steve Donovan, the Director of Alumni Relations at Trinity. We hope you are all staying safe and well, particularly those of you impacted this week by the deadly wildfires on the West Coast and the hurricane on the Gulf Coast. And welcome to another virtual long walk presentation where tonight we're especially excited to feature an accomplished parent of a current Trinity student. You are all aware of the remarkable breadth and strength of the Trinity network, and parents and families are a key element in that. Our speaker has a keen desire to be helpful to current students, as well as to share his story with all in the Trinity community. So we've enlisted the help of my talented colleague, Joe Catrino, who will moderate the conversation. Joe is the Executive Director of Student Success and Career Development at Trinity, and a wonderful partner in helping make meaningful connections for Trinity students with alumni and parents. So thank you, Joe. I'll now turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. I'd like to start off by offering my sincerest welcome to all of you who have joined us tonight. And I hope that you and your loved ones are doing well and are safe. It is my honor and pleasure to be joined this evening by Steve Hafner, bantam parent of Ava and the class of 2022. Today, in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic, we're honored to have Steve here with us to discuss the travel industry in the age of COVID. So welcome, Steve. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Joe. It's a pleasure.
Great. So tonight, just a little bit of an outline for what we're going to go through this evening. We're going to try to cover a lot. First, we're going to talk a little bit about Steve's path and the liberal arts. Second, we'll explore Steve's success as an entrepreneur. And third, we will ask Steve about the travel industry in the age of COVID. We will try to leave time at the end for any questions that you can send in from the audience. Please feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We will be moderating questions throughout this conversation tonight. So please feel free to use that Q&A feature, but we will leave time at the end of our conversation for questions from you. First, a little bit about Steve. Steve, again, is a parent of Ava in the class of 22, is the CEO of KAYAK, the online travel company he co-founded in 2004. Booking Holdings acquired KAYAK for $2.1 billion in 2013. Steve also oversees OpenTable, the world's leading provider for online restaurant reservations. Steve also helped launch Orbitz, the online travel agency, through its $1.3 billion IPO in 2003. He received a BA from Dartmouth College and an MBA from the Kellogg School at Northwestern University. Steve lives in Miami, Florida. One of his 5 daughters, again, Ava, is a member of the class of 22. So Steve, welcome again. I'd like to give you the opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us the background. How'd you get into this industry? What was your upbringing like? Just give us a sense of, what you studied, your extracurricular pursuits, and then a little bit more about your career path.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on, and thanks everyone for dialing in from wherever you are in the world. I apologize for not having my Trinity Dad t-shirt on. I was told wear some Trinity swag. The best I could muster up was this Fear the Chicken badge, which is homemade, but seems to work. My background's pretty straightforward. I was born in Lima, Peru to a Swedish mom and an American dad. I lived in Costa Rica, Guatemala, bounced around a lot. Finally grew up in Austin, Texas. Went to school, as you mentioned, undergrad at Dartmouth because I wanted to go someplace small and someplace with seasons other than hot and humid. Graduated from there as a management consultant, successfully avoided Wall Street, which I'm glad to do. And then went and got my MBA from Northwestern. Spent a couple of years there, having a lot of fun with fellow students and actually taking some good coursework too. And then started a company called Orbitz. Worked there for 4 years back in the early days of the internet, sold that, took 2 weeks off and then started KAYAK. And I've been here ever since. So that's kind of the short answer to my career path. If you want to read it even more succinctly, you can go to my LinkedIn profile. It's laid out there too.
Great, thank you. So what I'd like to do is we're going to kind of structure this across, as I mentioned, the 3 different themes. We're going to talk about the liberal arts a little bit. We'll talk about some entrepreneurial aspects, and then obviously we want to get to what's happening, in the day of COVID and the travel industry and how it might be impacted. I know we have a number of students in the audience, so what I'd love to kind of tackle is, talk to us about your experience in the liberal arts. What was your major? Did you have a sense of, what did you want to be when you grow up? If you could just kind of take us through that process, for those liberal arts students in the audience thinking about what their next steps are.
I got to tell you, I'm a big proponent of a liberal arts education. Not only did I go down that path, but my older brother did, my dad did, my little sister did, and both of my daughters, who were twin daughters, Ava's at Trinity, as you know, my other daughter's at Wilson is at Dartmouth. Liberal arts education is just irreplaceable because it helps people shape their minds to think, right? To be creative, to be curious, to dabble in multiple subjects, to be able to form an argument, to articulate that. There's just no substitute for it. It builds great minds. It trains athletes. Not to put down other forms of education, because certainly there's a lot to be gained by being an expert in some fields, but by being an athlete across all fields, I find that it creates a very well-rounded person. Now, I'm particularly entranced with East Coast schools, small East Coast schools. So I was thrilled when Ava decided to go to Trinity. I was thrilled when Wilson picked Dartmouth, because I think in a small school setting, you have a much greater chance of interacting with the highly talented people around you. You have tighter relationships between faculty and staff. And most importantly, the smaller the school, I found the stronger the alumni network. And that alumni network is a tremendous asset for students, particularly in this day and age while you're graduating into a COVID environment.
Yeah. When you were coming out of school, you mentioned you were a management consultant. Did you really leverage that Dartmouth network as well?
Well, I did, but what the Dartmouth network did, and Trinity has the same, is you attract great recruiters to the school, especially when you're on the East Coast, and a lot of different recruiters can get there, and they know how diverse and how talented the student body has been over many, many years. So they're quite comfortable with the badge of excellence that Trinity degree affords, right? So I think that gives recruiters a lot of confidence to come on campus, and that gives students the opportunity to look at a lot of different job opportunities.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience as a parent of a current Trinity student? What's that been like for you and Ava and your family?
It's been great despite this COVID disruption. I had a lot of fun going to Bantam football games last year, and Ava dragged me to a couple of parties too. So that was fun. I'm actually an AD from Dartmouth, so I stopped by the house. I'm sorry to see it's shut down right now, but I'm sure you'll get that sorted out. It's funny. Education's changed a lot in the 40 years or so since I graduated from undergrad. The technologies that are available in terms of coursework, access to books and records, international experience, that's all changed a lot. But what hasn't changed is the tight interaction between the students and the faculty and the professionals and the campus. So it's great for me to go back and see how much has advanced, but how much has really stayed the same. And it's the good stuff that stayed the same, and it's the tough stuff that's gotten better. So, I'm reliving my college days through the eyes of my daughter, who's having a very different experience than I had, but gosh, a lot of it is actually really the same.
Right. So I think we're both in agreement that there is value in having a liberal arts education from what you've experienced as a professional, and then ultimately what you're seeing for your daughter. And I imagine as you hire employees, do you get a sense of that as well?
I do. Look at coding's really important in this day and age. Finance, accounting, marketing, these are all important skills if you're moving into the world of business. But you can take courses for those. You can teach yourself that. What's much harder, and you can't get from one individual course, is how to think about a problem and how to be open-minded and curious. And that's what a liberal arts education is really all about. So I'm a big proponent. I'd say most of the people I've got working for me at KAYAK and OpenTable, even the software geeks, actually come from a liberal arts background.
That's great. So we're going to pivot to sort of the entrepreneurial perspective and how you started companies and ultimately sold some of them. Being an entrepreneur, I can imagine brings a lot of huge highs, right, and probably some lows as well. What are traits that are key in maintaining your sanity and more success than failure, right? So what are the traits that you have found in yourself and then also in your partners and colleagues?
And I think it's not just about being a good, the traits I'm going to describe are not just about being a good entrepreneur, it's actually about being a good human, because that's actually the most important thing. And really comes down to attitude. You want to approach every day with a great attitude, regardless of the facts on the ground at that point in time. Because, if you've got a great attitude and you're optimistic, you can push and persevere through a lot of obstacles that may stop someone who, doesn't come at it with the same approach. Another great trait is just to be likable, because there aren't many successful entrepreneurs who operate a company of one. You actually have to build a team around you of other people who want to interact with you. And being likable and being optimistic and having a great attitude is all part of that mix. So is being open-minded. And the other attribute of being a great entrepreneur, I think, is identifying a problem worth solving and then getting after it with superior execution. And too many entrepreneurs don't do both of those two things. And those are really important things. Find a problem worth solving. Not meta search for pet supplies, for example. Meta search for travel is a much better idea. And so there's just a lot of people going out there saying, I want to build an app for something, but they haven't really thought through, do you really want to spend your life building that app for that idea? I don't think so.
It's important to have that the judgment on, what are those problems worth, solving. That's a great tip. Talking about technologies, you mentioned this actually, pivots nicely to our next question. How do you anticipate technology? I mean, how do you keep up with it? How do you, again, I think we're looking for some advice on how do we find those problems that are worth solving. How do you keep up with it? It's constantly changing. Every day we have, new technology, new platforms. I mean, look what Zoom has been able to do, over this, COVID era. I mean, they were, a smaller company and it's exploded. So how do you keep up with it?
Well, you can't. I mean, the reality is in every facet of humanity today, be it technology or social or media or anything, the pace of innovation has escaped our ability to keep up with it. So you need to just prioritize and pick your spots. And for me, that really means having a constant level of churn in our organizations and our companies, which means it's okay if we turn over staff, if I get fresh eyes out of college, for example, into the organization, because it just naturally happens as you get older. Humans like to form habits. I was very comfortable with Excel. Now I use Google. I was very comfortable with AOL instant messaging. Now I use Slack. And we wouldn't have made any of those transitions, but for the fact that we had new employees coming in saying, what you're doing is backwards. It's obsolete. You need to try something new. So that's certainly true of technologies. It's also true of social networks, right? So you go from MySpace, Friendster to MySpace to Facebook to Snapchat, and now to TikTok. Who would have guessed it? Yeah, but so that's just how the natural evolution goes forward. And the best way to see what's coming is to look at what the youngest generations are doing, because it's what they're seeing, that everything that you grew up with plus the new stuff.
Yeah, that's great. What I'd like to do is I want to kind of pivot back to something you talked a little bit about yourself and how you started Orbitz and KAYAK, and I really want to focus on how did you end up where you are right now? If you could spend some time talking about those details. Like, did it start with an idea or a mission that you had, or did you say, I just want to launch my own venture, I'm ready to go out on my own? And then the big ideas came after that. Can you talk to us a little bit about how the process?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you how it worked for me, but I would say in general, I've met a lot of successful entrepreneurs, and everybody's story is different. So I don't know that you can draw any conclusion just from one anecdote or a few anecdotes. But I'll tell you, for me, it all began first of getting a great education. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, like a lot of other people, I suspect. So for me, it was all about making sure that I maximized my opportunities and I maximized my skill set. So I took classes in lots of different studies, even though I got bad grades in some of the ones that were far afield. I took diverse job opportunities. I got into consulting because I wanted to work with smart people across a lot of different projects and industries. And then it, you know, like so many other people, an opportunity came along that I decided to leave consulting to take. And this was right at the emergence of the internet. One of my friends left to go be number 2 at Amazon. Another one of my friends left to go be the 5th employee at Yahoo. And then I said, well, gosh, I think I can help bring travel online. And I left BCG to go help found Orbitz, which awesome. Some of your audience may use. I suspect a lot of you don't. Hopefully you use KAYAK instead.
That's great. Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about risk-taking. As you know, the economies around the globe have really struggled in recent months, and the job markets, you know, as we saw, you know, being in career development, you know, we saw quite an effect on the job market for recent college graduates. But if you could just share some advice on, you know, what you would give a would-be entrepreneur that has an idea. What is that piece of advice that you think you would give that person? Again,
I talked earlier about tackle a problem that's worth solving. That's probably the most important piece of advice I can give someone. And the second thing is maximize your chances of success, because you're probably going to fail. So the way to do that is be self and situational aware, know what you're good at, know what you're not good at, go find other people who can help complement your deficiencies, raise as much money as you can, because it comes in handy to be well-financed when you're making mistakes in the course of development. And then for all of the folks who have no interest in being entrepreneurs, but are just looking for jobs, I would tell you, don't worry about career path right now. COVID has given you the ultimate hall pass. So I'm saying this as an employer and as well as a father. Take this opportunity. You've got a year that you can perhaps take off and go do unique things. You know, you can go take remote learning, like one of my daughters is doing, Ava actually, in Bermuda right now. You know, she's in Bermuda taking Trinity classes. What can be better than that, right? You know, if you graduated and you don't have a job, go travel, go see the world, experience new things. Take a job that normally wouldn't be on your ordinary career path and try it out. You're not going to get this year back. So make the most of it. Yeah. So again, that goes back to attitude, having a positive attitude, regardless of what you get dealt. And it's not going to be a black mark on your CV from employers. We look at it very differently. Yeah. Yeah. We see that a lot in career development in our work with employers. You keep hitting on attitude and having that positive attitude. And a few minutes ago, you talked a little bit about failure. You know, and I imagine that, you know, everything wasn't perfect throughout your work as an entrepreneur. You know, do you think, you know, having that positive attitude to tackle and face adversity and not be afraid of failing, is something you think helped you with that positive attitude? Absolutely. I mean, attitude's what gets you through. Look, we launched Orbitz started Orbitz in 1999. We launched it in June of 2001. 3 months later, 9/11 happened, and I had to let go 25% of my employees. So we went from selling 27,000 tickets a day, which at that time was a lot, to selling none. And yet, you know, we bounced back from it. Right now, I'm sitting in an empty airport in Miami. That's where I am. And you know, in February, we had the best month ever at KAYAK and at OpenTable, you know, in terms of seated diners and travelers. We just had our worst month ever in June. So, you know, our employees could stay in bed. We could be negative and pessimistic, but we're doing the exact opposite. We're trying to find ways in this period of time to help travelers and help consumers, get them back on the road safely, get them back into restaurants safely, help airlines, help restaurants. And we're not alone in this. You know, everyone in the tech industry is trying to pivot and innovate in this downturn. And history has shown when downturns happen, great companies emerge from the outside, great new services like this call, Zoom. You know, we wouldn't have done this a year ago. 300 people on one video conference, unimaginable. So this is great progress, and we'll emerge stronger than we went into it, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Talking about being an entrepreneur, we actually got a couple of good questions that are related to some of the things that you are talking about. I got a specific question from John Nolan. Can you talk about your experience selling to Priceline? Did your vision for KAYAK line up well with Priceline? Have you ever been given free rein to run KAYAK in the way you'd like?
It's a great question. It's one that I get asked by a lot of people, particularly entrepreneurs who are thinking about selling their babies, right? Their ventures. And the reality is, KAYAK wasn't about me. Yeah, I helped start it, but we had, at the time we sold to Priceline, 300 employees. We had shareholders, public and private, and we had a lot of other partners. So it wasn't my decision. But it was a great fit because what we had built at KAYAK, Priceline, which is now renamed Booking Holdings, said we had done a great job in the U.S., but they operated in 144 countries. So they said, we can help you expand this. They said, we'll give you the financial firepower to expand it as well as in the marketing know-how, and we'll let you run it independently. And they've honored all of that stuff. That's why I'm still here. Mm-hmm. I've been to KAYAK for, I think, 16 years now, which is crazy. And 7 of those have been under Booking Holdings ownership, and I love it.
Awesome.
But that's been my experience, by the way, and a lot of other founders don't have that. So, right. While you're in the process of selling a company, be very careful who you're doing business with, because it's just like getting married. During the courtship period, people will say anything. Once the vows are done, then the real life begins.
Yeah. I got an interesting question that I don't know. From Julie Spencer Robinson, how did KAYAK get its name?
Great question. Naming was always really important to me because I knew we were going to spend a ton of money on marketing. And there was a lot of industry evidence out there that on the internet, if you had 6 letters or fewer, you're more likely to get people to type your name directly into the search bar. Mm-hmm. So we knew we wanted to be 6 letters. Think Google, think Yahoo, think AOL. These TikTok, these are all 6 letters or fewer words. We didn't want it to be functional, so we didn't want it to be travel.com. We wanted it to be aspirational. We loved KAYAK because it was a palindrome. You mm-hmm. could say it in every language. It connoted independence and being self-powered and being friendly to the environment. So those are all reasons that we chose KAYAK. But it was actually our third choice. Our first choice was cake, because when you say cake, everyone smiles. It's shorter, but we couldn't buy it. Our second choice was Lola, which is short for longitude, latitude, but we couldn't buy that one either. Although my KAYAK co-founder, Paul English, picked it up a couple years ago, and now that's the name of his new company.
Oh, that's awesome. So we have I'm going to keep going with some of these questions because I think they're relevant to some of the entrepreneurial aspects of our current theme. How is KAYAK differentiated? This is from Bruce Hauptführer. How is KAYAK differentiated from other online travel companies, and what is your sweet spot?
Sure, Bruce. So look, the industry has changed a lot since we launched KAYAK in 2004. So when I launched KAYAK, before KAYAK was Orbitz, and the whole sweet spot for Orbitz was letting people search for airline tickets 24 hours a day and buy them online without having to walk into an airport or an airline ticket agency or an online travel agency. But Orbitz would only show you what they could sell you. So if there's an airline that didn't want to be sold through Orbitz or a hotel, Orbitz couldn't sell it to you. And if you wanted to use Orbitz to search for a fare and then you wanted to buy it at the airline site, Orbitz wouldn't let you do that either. So KAYAK was a simple insight at the time, which was, we're going to search everything and we're going to show you everything. So we're going to show you airlines that only want to be sold on their own websites. We're going to show you hotels that only want to be shown on their own websites. But we're also going to show you Orbitz, Expedia, Travelocity, everyone else. And that was the simple insight that made KAYAK work. Again, straightforward idea, problem worth solving, but really fiendishly hard to execute. So it took us a long time to get it right. Yeah. And it's not right yet. In the internet, everything is constantly evolving, and KAYAK is too.
So I want to now pivot to the travel industry in the age of COVID. As you know, COVID has essentially stopped most travel around the world, although you're sitting in an airport, so it hasn't completely stopped it. Can you walk us through what it's been like for you and your business since March, through today? What's it been like?
Am I allowed to curse on this? It's been a total
I say,
shit
yeah,
show.
go for it.
It's been a total shit show, but we're bouncing back from it. So, when this first started to emerge in November, December, we actually have operations globally now. We have 30 offices globally, and we saw what was happening in Asia to our query volumes, our travel query volumes, and we said, uh-oh, I hope we get this thing contained. And we had gotten previous viruses contained, like SARS and others like swine flu, which we didn't get contained, were very contagious, but didn't have a high mortality rate. So we were initially optimistic, but then as things progressed, we saw, gosh, this is going to be bad, and query volumes just dropped off a cliff. So I think our low point was April 8th, when we published all this data publicly, by the way. So if anyone who's listening wants to go see the evolution of KAYAK query volume over time, you can do that. Low point was April 8th, when queries were down 90% versus the previous year. That's how bad it got. Now they're back to about 50% of previous year. But there's been a big change in consumer behavior. People aren't traveling internationally anymore. They're staying domestic. They're going for direct flights, even if that's a slightly more expensive than a one-stopper. They're staying on the shortest flights possible. They're going to off-beaten track destinations that are not crowded. So, people aren't going to New York City, but they are going to Florida. And people are also taking a lot of road trips and staying in non-traditional accommodations. They're not going to Marriott hotels. They're going to entire apartments or entire homes in the country. So it's been a big shift in behavior.
Yeah.
But for those of us who are still flying, it's actually a wonderful time to fly. There's no lines at TSA. You're getting middle seats clear on almost every airplane. The airplanes themselves have never been cleaner. They wipe everything down. The food sucks, though. Food sucks. But that's always been true.
Yeah. So has the pandemic, created any new opportunities for travel, for KAYAK, even for OpenTable? Have there been new opportunities? We talked a little bit about pivoting before. How have you adjusted over the last few months with new opportunities?
Yeah, there's been a lot of innovation, not just at KAYAK, but also on the OpenTable. I mean, I'll spend some time talking about OpenTable, which I help oversee too. The innovation of restaurateurs and their resilience in this is astonishing. Yeah. So, you saw restaurants go from just, you have to walk in, talk to a hostess, check in, be seated at a table, be handed a menu, interact with a waiter, etc. Pivot to outdoor dining, to takeout, to delivery, to contactless menus that you scan with your smartphone, soon contactless pay. So you just walk out like an Uber-like experience, picking your own table, ordering from your phone, all that kind of stuff. And what's great about that innovation is restaurateurs were a very staid industry, meaning they were very habitual, very traditional. Now, once COVID recedes into the background, consumer habits and restaurateur habits aren't going to change. It's going to be weird for you to think in a year or two from now that I need to go check into a waiter's hostess stand and then have him or her walk me to a table. I need to interact with a waiter to order. I need to interact with a waiter to pay. No, you're not going to do any of that. You're going to expect when you walk into a restaurant to be told which table to sit at. You'll whip out your phone. You'll order from it. You'll pay from it. You'll leave reviews. You'll rate dishes. You'll take pictures of dishes, which people already do. So a lot of innovation is already happening on the dining side. And a lot of innovation is also happening on the airline side. I don't think people are going to print airline tickets anymore at these kiosks. I think they'll start just using their phone like everybody else should be doing and has been doing in Asia for years.
Yeah. This is a question from Michael Gilman. Steve, do you think the airline industry will get back to the level of profitability they had before COVID? And if so, when? Thank you.
Yeah, Michael, the answer is not for a very, very long time. What we're seeing in our data is leisure travel is much more likely to bounce back than business travel, because business travelers have figured out how to sell new prospects like we're doing right now via video conference and without seeing them in person. And a lot of businesses simply can't afford to pay for their employees' travel expenses. So business travel isn't going to come back anytime soon. It will come back. It's come back after every other crisis, including the the last one, the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, but it's going to take years. And the downside for leisure travelers about that is business travelers usually pay 2/3 of the revenue associated with a flight. So if you don't have business travel come back, you're going to have fewer flights in terms of schedules, because business travelers are sticklers for, hey, I got to be there by 10 a.m. in the morning, not 1 p.m. So you're going to see fewer flights, and you're also going to see, on average, higher fares, because business travelers subsidize leisure fares. So the whole concept that there are bargains out there to be had for leisure travelers, that's true today because the airlines are still trying to stimulate demand, but you're not going to see flight schedules come back anytime soon. So 2023, 2024 is kind of the neighborhood I would plan on. Great question.
We have another question. This question was actually sent to us in advance from John Densom in the class of 62. What is KAYAK doing to help their customers and navigate the open-close border situation and quarantines? If I book through KAYAK and then borders close and/or quarantines are reinstated after I book through KAYAK, what is KAYAK doing to see that any last-minute restrictions reintroduced after reservations and right before travel result in a refund or of any repayments? Did you get all that?
Sure, I did, and you're not the first person who's brought that to our attention. And what we've done at KAYAK is very quickly respond to everything. So if you look at our search results page, or even at the front door when you're looking on where to go, we'll tell you exactly what the existing COVID policies and restrictions are for each place you're considering going to. Also, next to each search result, we'll tell you by airline who's got what safety and cleanliness measures, who's got what change and cancellation fees. We have a filter area on the left where you can filter out non-refundable tickets or tickets with cancellation fees. So all that information is there for you. I will say that the travel industry is being very forthcoming and very passenger friendly. So most of the big major airlines now have completely waived change fees. So you can book it with a little bit more confidence that if something does go wrong, the airlines are not going to give you your money back, but they're going to give you a credit that you can use in the future.
We have a question from Hannah Stebbins, who's a class of 20 grad, an alum. What kind of travel tips do you have for airline travel during COVID? What are the new opportunities in the travel industry too? Asking for myself, who wants to visit my fellow 2020 grad friends who live all around the country.
Yeah, it's well, as long as you're staying in the U.S., it's actually pretty straightforward. There's no real changes to travel policies other than, as I mentioned before, airlines have waived change fees, airports are not crowded, and the airlines themselves are a lot cleaner than they've ever been, and you'll be able to get more space. If you're trying to and thinking about going internationally, that's where you really need to be careful, because even if you can get out of the country and get on a flight somewhere, it doesn't mean that they're going to let you in when you get there. And if you do get there, they may require a mandatory quarantine. So if you're an American trying to go to Paris right now, for example, good luck, you can't do it. Even if you boarded the plane, they wouldn't let you off of it when you got to Paris. You can go to the UK, but they're going to require you to stay quarantined for 14 days. So I would be very careful about international travel, but domestic, have at it.
Here's a question from Pinal J. Patel, who is also an alum of our graduate programs. How is the global liberal arts growth contributing to the COVID environment?
I don't really understand the question, actually. How is the global liberal arts growth contributing to COVID? What do you mean? I guess Joe, you can't answer that either.
I can't, no. Dave, you can give us some... Go ahead.
I was going to say, unfortunately, I think it has prevented a lot of international students from getting to the U.S. to pursue their studies. And it's also prevented a lot of people who internationally were in the U.S. from getting home to see their loved ones. Also for a lot of Trinity students and even other communities who had study abroad programs that are very robust and a very important part of the liberal arts experience, you can't pursue that right now. Now, my daughter Ava's in Bermuda only because she couldn't go where she wanted to go to study, right? So, if that was the question, I think I've answered it. If it was something different, I'm sorry, I missed it. You can type it in one more time.
You answered actually part of this question, part one of this question from Lessa Rader Giberson, but she's curious what your major was at Dartmouth.
Sure, I was a double major in economics and history. Economics because I thought it was a useful major, and it was the closest you could come to a business major at Dartmouth at the time, and history because I just love history.
Yeah, I was a history major myself. I'm actually going to ask a question from me, and this is definitely selfishly speaking. So, as you can imagine, we talked a little bit about this early on, that the pandemic and COVID certainly has impacted and affected the class of 20. And we've spent, a significant amount of time this summer. We created a program called 2020 Connect that bridge connections between 2020 graduates and alums to foster like a 5-week mentor program. We're going to do the same for the class of 21, but I'm just really curious if you have, I know you mentioned, could do some classes. There's some, you have this opportunity to kind of do what you want. This is sort of an opportunity to pivot and try new things. Do you have any other, any other advice, for the class of 20 to, help them keep their heads up and stay with that positive attitude? Because, I do talk regularly with some class of 20 grads and they're feeling it right now. And so selfishly speaking, I could use some help.
Yeah, look, everyone who is going through this and doesn't have a job or is somehow inhibited from doing what they want to do should view this as a gap year. It's a gap year for you to stay involved or pursue passions that you otherwise would not have been able to pursue if you had gotten that job of your dreams, et cetera. So go do that stuff, go try a new experience, go build your skill set, go interact with amazing people. It's not going to hurt your CV. That said, you can't loaf either. The worst thing you can do is loaf for a year. Stay networked, stay connected, build your skill set. And when the jobs come back, and they will come back, stay top of mind of potential employers. I'll tell you, at KAYAK and OpenTable, we've got 2,000 employees. Generally, we'll have 100 new hires come in every year, and we'll have 40 internships at any given point in time. We have 0 of that going on today. But as travel comes back, guess what? We're going to reignite that. And the first people we're going to reach out to are the folks who have stayed in contact with us during this period. And especially if those people have interesting stories to tell or new skills that makes them even more attractive than the first time we wanted to hire them.
Yeah. We have a question here from, if a 2020 Trinity grad wants to work in the travel industry, where should she begin?
Well, the travel industry is a big industry. It's 11% of GDP, and there's a lot of different areas. You can work in hospitality at hotels. You can work for an airline. You can work for the cars. You can work for technology companies like KAYAK and Airbnb and others. So I think you need to narrow it down. Besides saying I love travel, I want to be in the travel industry. Find out what exactly it is that appeals to you. Yeah. Is it interacting with people? Is it logistics and operations? Because planes are fun things to operate. They're really complicated, and a lot of people love that stuff. Or is it working for a tech platform? Or is it doing customer service or marketing? So, figure out what interests you about the travel industry, and then narrow it down and then do outreach to those companies. But there's still, despite the downturn, a lot of opportunities here. Maybe not as flight attendants or as pilots, because there's 40,000 of them who just got laid off in the last month alone. But there still is a lot of opportunities in marketing and in tech and in customer service that's out there. It will come back.
Yeah. There's another question that came in from Jorge Castro. How do you anticipate the seismic shift of employees into Zoom and the virtual world will affect KAYAK's operations, strategies, and costs in the future moving forward? Have you noticed an increase or decrease in average productivity per employee?
We spend a lot of time thinking about this at KAYAK and OpenTable, which is what's the optimal amount of time our employees should interact with each other, and both virtually and physically in offices. We have tremendous investments in our 30 worldwide offices. They're great spaces. So if you think Google and Facebook have nice offices, you haven't seen ours. They're amazing places where we think people should interact and collaborate and innovate together. That said, based on the analysis we've done of Slack message volumes, meeting volumes, et cetera, people have been able to maintain their productivity during this pandemic while working from home. So I think what we're going to morph to, and we're not alone in this, is a hybrid model where we give our employees a lot more flexibility about where they work, but we expect them to be in the office call it 2-3 days a week, which can change based on their level of seniority and how they get to work. But I think if you're a new employee or a new intern, like my daughters were over the summer, it's really hard to plug into a new organization and get the culture and have the interactions and be productive. If you've been there for 15 years, like I've been at KAYAK, I can work from anywhere. I'm working from an airport right now. But there's no replacement for human interaction, especially for innovation. So I think our office footprint may shrink a little bit in real estate. Our expectations for our employees may be that they can work from home more often and they can spend less time commuting. But overall, I think the pronounced death of commercial real estate. No way, man. No way.
Got another question. Talking about employees and actually customers here from Jay. How are you addressing the diversity concerns from customers and employees?
Jay, that's another big topic of ours. One of our corporate values is for our workforce to resemble the communities that we serve and be just as diverse as our travelers and diners. So we have a head of D&I, diversity and inclusion. We have big training initiatives against that. We have goals across the organization for being an inclusive recruiter. Most importantly, it's recruiter. So the challenge you find is if you're trying to hire someone at a very senior level, the talent pool is pretty lean these days, and there's a lot of competition for it. So what we want to do is we want to make sure our recruiting, and we have a lot of churn in our company, we recruit diversity, and then we put a lot of effort in training those people to make them really awesome and to achieve their potential. And then the most important thing is, after we've done that, we got to keep them at KAYAK and OpenTable and not let these Facebook and Google clowns poach them. So it's a big topic of ours. We're showing actually great success against it, but we still have a long ways to go. And you also got to keep in mind, we're not just a U.S. company, we're a global company. So, here in the U.S., we think about diversity and inclusion through a couple lenses. And it's not just that, because our office in Thailand, for example, we have to think about diversity of making sure that our office isn't too Thai, that we're actually welcoming to other Asian communities and even the expat community. So it's a thorny issue worldwide, but it's one that I think we have the processes and desires that are spot on to where we need to go. But I think every modern corporation is pursuing the same stuff.
I have another question from Christina Soriano. I'm a Trinity alum, class of '98, who works in the arts in higher ed. Museums are slowly opening up all over the country with performance arts venues, perhaps to follow soon in limited capacities. Knowing the arts industry has been so gutted by COVID, how can companies like KAYAK and OpenTable get people traveling and eating to stimulate the creative and arts economy? That's a great question.
It's a great question. And one of the things that we're looking at for innovation at KAYAK is how do we get people into experiences like restaurants and like museums, et cetera. So if we can't get them on airplanes, how do we make sure they're not sitting on their couches playing Fortnite? And that's where the experiences and that's where the museums come in. So one of the things I've got a team of developers working on right now, which we hope to launch in about 60 days, is a new area on KAYAK that's experiences. So we launched road trips a few months ago, and now if you use that, it shows you with the radius where you can go, in a 3-hour drive or a 1-hour drive and places to stay. The next level is things you can do, and museums are a big part of that mix. And I will say another thing that we've worked on the OpenTable side is that was a reservation platform for restaurants. We've hacked that software, so now grocery stores can take reservations, Nike stores can take reservations, museums can take reservations, so they can actually know who's in their venues and also capacity control it. So it's another example of the innovation that comes about when you have a crisis like this.
Yeah. So this is another COVID related question from Philip Chowry. At what point in the future do you see an easing of COVID related government travel restrictions that would enable Americans to freely travel overseas again? What do you believe are some of the key steps for governments and businesses to get the overseas leisure travel market back on track, to get travelers comfortable with overseas travel again and at a pre-COVID volume levels?
It's going to be a long slog, and it's a complicated question because the facts on the ground change so frequently. You know, a few weeks ago, the Europeans were thumbing their noses at Americans saying, we know how to control COVID, the Americans have bungled it. Well, you fast forward to yesterday, they had more cases in Europe of COVID than we had here in the US. So, you know, 3 weeks ago, it was the Europeans stopping the Americans from coming in. Now I think we flipped the switch, and it's more the Americans stopping the Europeans from coming in. So I think it's going to be a very fluid environment. You know, the real thing about getting our hands around COVID and learning to live with it is we've got testing now, we've got treatment now, which is both very good, but what we really need is a vaccine for our most vulnerable populations. And we've got 9 of those in late stage clinical trials. 2 of them are actually from the Chinese, and they're testing not only in hundreds of thousands of Chinese they've administered it to, but also some folks in Bahrain. So hopefully we'll get something on the vaccine side that it will not be available for everybody for a long period of time, because most folks will need two doses. But our most vulnerable people, we know exactly who those folks are, can get this vaccine, and that should give more governments and more people comfort to move around. Because you know, if you're a Trinity student, the vast majority of Trinity students who catch COVID are going to do just fine. But the grandparents they visit may not. So that's who we've got to protect.
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me, Serena Elavia from class of 14. We've answered the first part of her question, so I'm just going to skip to the second part of her questions, which we haven't talked about. Is there anything that KAYAK is testing now that you couldn't do before with everyone in an office?
That's an interesting question. I don't think so. You know, what I would say is, in an office, I could walk by someone's desk and see what they're working on. Right now, all bets are off. So we've had a lot of hackathonic ideas actually just show up in our code base that nobody on the senior management team knew was being worked on, much less would see the light of day. You know, that some of those examples are KAYAK Essentials, which was a meta search for basically toilet paper. KAYAK Road Trips came out of that. So I think there's a lot of innovation, but you know, a lot of it actually isn't going to stick. Just because if it was a good idea, most of the time we would have prioritized that and service that at the management team level. But you know, on dining, there is a lot more stuff than in travel. I will say, as a teaser, you should expect to see the first KAYAK branded hotel come out soon, and we've been spending a lot of time on that, which is a pretty cool idea. Because you know, up until now, KAYAK has been all about finding the best prices and giving you complete choice. Now we want to actually pivot to helping the travel experience become better, and enable that. And you know, if you want to do that, you actually got to fly the planes and run the hotels, and we're going to start doing that.
We have a question here from Stephen Chase. Do you expect to see an increase in mergers and acquisitions within the travel industry? If so, what what sector has cash? And Steve is an alum of the class of 14.
Yeah, Steve. I don't think you'll see a lot of M&A activity right now. Everybody is scrambling to preserve their own, you know, survival. That includes the big airlines. So you saw, maybe you didn't, Delta, for example, just ransomed its Sky Miles program for almost $6 billion to help them see through the crunch. So I don't see big airlines consolidating. Big hotel companies, I don't think want to consolidate either. No one wants to tie themselves to somebody else who might pull them under. Also, people's valuation expectations are still at pre-COVID levels. Even for tech companies like mine, I would never sell KAYAK for less than I sold it for, just because our business is down 75% versus last year. So I think a mismatch between buyers' appetite to buy and sellers' appetite to sell at a reasonable price is going to dampen M&A. Coming out of this, though, I think in a couple of years, you're going to see continued consolidation in the travel space, just like you're seeing in every other industry. You know, the benefits to scale globally are just too great to ignore.
Got a question from Isan, who is a student at Trinity. I know Isan quite well. As a medium through which tourists are making their travel decisions, travel agencies have immense knowledge about tourists' decisions. In KAYAK, are you trying to understand consumers' behavior based on their booking data and use that information to try increasing tourism by collaborating with actors? For example, do you have such analysis about what type of destinations make countries attractive to tourists? If yes, do you engage with countries for suggesting to increase the number of those types of destinations?
So you're spot on. We have a tremendous amount of data. That's one of the primary benefits of being an online e-commerce player, not just in travel, but you see across the internet. On a typical month, we would process over 1 billion queries. So that's consumer requests for travel information. And then we observe exactly what consumers interact with, their travel dates, their length of stays, which airlines they like, which fares they click on versus don't click on, the attributes of the hotels they're looking at. So we have all of this data, and we not only have it in aggregate form, we actually have it for individuals. So, when I use Kayak, I see a very different set of screens and results than if Joe was to use Kayak. We use all that information today to help make our product better. We don't sell that information. We don't give it to travel suppliers, and we don't give it to destination marketing organizations or government agencies. I suspect we probably will still hesitate to do that, just because one of our mantras is, I like privacy. I don't like to be a commodity, my data traded. And we apply that to Kayak and into OpenTable. So for us, the data we see is all about making the product better. And as it pertains to destinations, we were already, Barcelona, for example, was already complaining about being over touristed. So when people were looking for a flight to Barcelona, we would say, hey, have you suggested these other 3 destinations that would love to have tourists and which have the capacity and were also really good matches for Barcelona? So that's mainly how we use the data. So I hope that helps answer the question.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, consumer behavior, that's what I think was the heart of the question. So we only have time for a couple more questions because I want to be respectful of your time. So we've talked a lot about the impact of COVID, and in these difficult times, obviously you've talked a lot about, having a positive attitude, but are you an optimist? How are you feeling about the future of your industry and where we're going?
I'm very much an optimist, even if this was persist for 10 years. I mean, our mission is to help everyone easily experience the world through travel and dining. I think it makes for humans, it enriches the communities that we live in, and I'm just thrilled to be part of the fabric that's making that happen. Even despite COVID dampening supply and dampening people's desire to do it, it will all come back. We all need to travel. We all need to eat at great restaurants and interact with our fellow humans. So that's all going to come back, and it's actually great. And for those of you who have been impacted by this negatively, particularly on the health side, it's really tough. But life's all about attitude. You have a hall pass this year. Use it intelligently. Don't play Fortnite and sit on the couch. Go do some other cool stuff.
So we have one final question for you, Steve, from Douglas McDonald. What's your favorite travel destination?
Yeah, gosh, it's different for different reasons, but I'm a beach guy, and I live in Miami Beach. So my favorite travel destination is actually St. Bart's. It's relatively easy for me to get to. It feels like I'm in France when I'm there. It's small, it's great food. The only downside is it's really expensive, so I can only afford to go there once a year, but I make the most of it when I can.
Awesome. So we've about 2 minutes left. I'd love to give you any last words, any final thoughts, any messages you'd like to convey and leave the Trinity community with.
Well, thanks again, Joe, for hosting me. And for those of you who joined the call, you are part of a great, great school and a great, strong community. I have one little anecdote. I drive a very old Defender. My daughter Ava put a Trinity sticker on the back of it, and there's like 15 different stickers back there. I get back to my car about 4 months ago, and there's a note underneath my windshield from a class of 69 Trinity saying he had no idea who I was, but he saw the Trinity sticker and he wished me extremely well. And if someone's going to do that 40 years after they graduated from school, it just really speaks to the power of the community that you have. So take advantage of it. You're only going to go around once. The campus is great. The faculty is world-class. The professionals like Joe and Steve and others are awesome. And your alumni base, oh man, I thought Dartmouth had a strong alumni base. Trinity blows us out of the water. So
Awesome.
enjoy and capitalize on it. And,
Yeah.
and most of all, be safe. Be safe.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Steve. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us tonight. You've really made Trinity proud, and we look forward to following your continued success at KAYAK and OpenTable. Thank you, everyone who was able to join us tonight. Everyone stay safe, be well. Good night, and thank you again.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.